This is Guitar Business Radio, the podcast for the business of guitar. No reviews, no demos, no idle chatter, just useful dialogue and information to help you get the most out of your guitar-related business. Whether you're a guitar builder or a guitar player or just something in between, this is for you. Now, here's your host. Oh, wait, it's me, Jeffrey D. Brown. So let's get to it. Well, the odds makers were right. We made it to episode 7, and there's no end in sight. We have a great show for you today as we talk about extending the collective range with Bill Conklin of Conklin Guitars and Basses, who in my opinion is truly a pioneer in extended range, multi-scale, multi-string instruments. So stick around for that. Now, one of the first things I said in episode 1 was that this show would change a lot over time. That's the natural course. Some things will come and go, other things will evolve into something else, who knows. But one thing that will help us a lot is your feedback. So let us know how we're doing, what you like and what you could care less about. It's all good. So feel free to use our GBR hotline, where you can leave us a testimonial if you like, an opinion on the business, or just a shout out of sorts, and we'll play the most relevant ones on the show. So just call 877-228-4703 and press 2. Now I want to go back in time a bit. Some of you may remember that about 10 years ago or so, maybe a bit more, I built what was in those days a very unique website for the guitar world. It was called The Guitar Wall. Now, for those of you who remember but didn't know, the wall was based rather loosely on a concept developed by a guy named Alex Tu in the UK in 2005. It was called, get ready for this, the $1 Million Homepage. In fact, he's moved on to other stuff, but that original page is still up there, I think at milliondollarhomepage.com, if you want to take a look. I was shocked the other day to see that it's still there, although most of the functionality has understandably degraded over the years. Now, for sure, the $1 million part of it never happened for the Guitar Wall, but over 500 guitar builders and other companies in the business participated on the project. Each of them had their own unique wall space, some having more than one, and there were many different sizes and shapes. The idea, of course, was very simple. Stare at the wall, see something you like, click on the wall space, and go to the space holder's website. That was it, nothing more. But over 2 million visitors came and interacted with the wall during its lifetime from all over the world. But the fact is, I created a bit of a monster, and the thing became enormous, with as many as 30 different walls at one time. That included about a dozen dedicated walls for individual companies. And I put in just hundreds and hundreds of hours on this thing. And like I said, there was no $1 million return for the Guitar Wall. We probably covered our costs with it, but the true return was honestly not measured in revenue. The original Guitar Wall ran for 9.5 years, and over that span of time, I developed a lot of great relationships in the guitar universe because of the wall, as well as Guitar PR, which I was running concurrently at the time, but that was a somewhat different business than it is in its current form today. Unfortunately, about a year ago, the wall technology that we were using became unstable, and it was simply not sustainable. There was no way to upgrade it or convert it short of starting over, and it had become vulnerable to infection. So at that time, I had to make the decision, sadly, to take it down. Now, months went by, and more, I began to think maybe there's a way to resurrect the wall in a new form of some kind that would be stable, sustainable, and offer something more. After all, I still had about 30,000 active followers, and I really hadn't been able to get this thing out of my blood, frankly. So finally, last summer, I decided to rebuild it from scratch, and about a month later, a new Guitar Wall was born, just about 10 years to the day from the original. So the Guitar Wall 2017, now 2018, is really a horse of a different animal, as we say. It's built on a sustainable platform. It's responsive, unlike the original, so it plays well on any device. It has many more features and potential, and something completely different. Wall spaces are free and available to most guitar-related companies who produce a physical product that we can present on the wall. There's just a few hoops to jump through to maintain the quality and integrity of the work that we present on the wall, but nonetheless, a free wall space is available, both to prior wall space holders and new ones as well. So the Guitar Wall got to celebrate its 10th anniversary after all with a new tagline, the original discovery wall for the guitar universe. I think we have about 50 companies or so participating early on. And for those of you who might be interested in the original Guitar Wall, we created a history tab that contains some nostalgic information and images that you might enjoy. We haven't publicized it a lot yet, but now I think seems like a good time to start ramping it up. So if you've not seen the new wall, take a visit at theguitarwall.com. Let us know what you think. Now, without any further interruption, we take you to this. Now, once again, it's time for Questionable Moments, the segment where we bring up relevant questions of interest to our listeners, bat them around a bit, and see just what kind of answers we can come up with. So in episode 6, we brought up the following question. What is the state of the extended range guitar and bass market? And here we did get some interesting responses. First from Facebook, Dennis adds, I think its current popularity is simply a fad. It'll die like all the other fads in the guitar world that have come and gone. And just like all fads, there will be some builders that offer it because it does serve a purpose. But most people with an ERG simply don't use it as intended. Well, thanks, Dennis, as always, but I'm still curious about the intended use, and that kind of brings up a separate sub-question. I know you said sonic freedom, and I guess that works, but if anyone else has a thought on what the intended use for these instruments should be, please chime in. Now, Nick gives us this. He says, I refined my technique over years on traditional style fretboards. My first experience with a multi-scale bass was not to my liking. All of my barring motions for string skipping were out of whack, and I feel it would take hours to develop a new playing style suited to it, but due to the cost of new instruments, I won't spend $1,000 plus on an instrument that doesn't accentuate my existing muscle memory. The idea, however, is genius, the aesthetic is awesome, but it just wasn't practical for me. And this one from our website, Samuel writes, I think the sky's the limit, it seems. I just saw an 11-string bass. What might be good is some kind of report or comparison of these instruments and maybe a listing of great performances as well. I don't know if it's just a trend or what, but I'm looking forward to Conklin's interview. He's the man. Well, Samuel, I haven't seen a formal comparison document, although I've looked. Doesn't mean it doesn't exist. I just haven't seen it, but maybe someone else has and they can tell us. As for performances, try a YouTube search on extended range basses. You'll see quite a bit. I mean, there's a ton. Well, those are all great comments. I'm not sure I have much more to add to those at the moment, but in just another moment, we'll ask Bill Conklin himself about all of this. Now on to this week's new questionable moment. So remember, I said to expect change. Well, we're changing things up a bit for this week's questionable moment. Now, because this show is for you, and we want to provide you with as much relevant and interesting content as possible, our question this week is, what guitar business questions should we ask on GBR? Well, this is your chance to influence the agenda, so think about it and let us know on our website at guitarbusinessradio.com and click on either questions or participate, or on Facebook or Twitter at Guitar Business. As always, if they're good questions, we'll use them on the show and we'll mention your name if you like, and you may become famous or not. Now, for something completely different. Well, Bill Conklin started Conklin Guitars and Basses nearly 35 years ago, and during that time has developed a reputation as both a pioneer and an innovative builder of extended range and multi-scale instruments, among others. His work is amazing, and his customer list is vast and includes many well-known and respected players. On top of that, he's a genuinely good guy and someone I've had the pleasure of knowing for many years. And Bill Conklin joins us today. So, Bill, thanks for coming on the show today. Glad to have you.
Glad to be here, Jeff. Thank you so much.
Terrific. Well, first of all, you and I have known each other for, almost a decade or so, it seems like. But Conklin Guitars has been in business, I think, working up toward 35 years or so. And it's been quite a while. But, it was only about 3 years ago that I came across this thing on your website called the Time Capsule that really displayed a tremendous amount of historical work that you've done. And I say that in totally meaning that it's historical. Much of this I had never seen before, and there's some incredible stuff there. So what I thought we could do is go back to the beginning and hear how all of this started, kind of the how and the why part of it.
Well, in all honesty, Jeff, when I started the company back in 1984, I had no idea how I was going to put this thing together, how I was going to run it. I was 21 years old. I had no business experience. I think like a lot of budding entrepreneurs, whether they start something in their youth or maybe leave a lucrative career or whatever midway and decide to start a business or whatever. I think a lot of us get into something because we're inspired, we're intrigued, we're motivated by a creative bug, but not necessarily, a business background. And I had nothing. I had no guitar building experience.
You had no woodworking experience?
I had no woodworking experience. I had one semester of high school wood shop, and basically that's learning safety procedures and doing a little bit of work on some machines. A lot of guys are building cutting boards and things like that. I'll just give you a little background. When I was just a small child, 4, 5, 6 years old, I was very much into art and anything creative. I got involved in all kinds of art contests and art fairs, and as I came up through school, I was very much into multimedia, like watercolor, pen and ink, scratchboard, all kinds of pen and pencil, watercolors, everything. I was just into art of any kind. I was winning a lot of awards and stuff in grade school and high school and various things. Then as I got into my teen years, a lot of my friends started getting into music, and I was becoming more aware of all the different types of music, and it was a wonderful musical time back in that era, late 60s, early 70s, and then on into the sort of the hair band era and things like that.
Sure, of course.
So music started to heavily inspire me. My friends were getting into it, and they were, putting together a little band and stuff. So I picked up a little crappy little bass and started playing bass, So then there was the art side of me and then the music side of me. And about the time I was, I'd say 13, 14, 15, I started putting those two things together, and I started drawing pictures of wild shaped guitars.
Wow, I didn't that early. I didn't realize that. Wow.
Yeah, and I would take like the little Indian chief tablets, and I would start sketching just wild, crazy shapes. Again, I was inspired by things that were happening at the time. Like I say, I was really into Kiss. I was maybe 17, 18 years old. I was, inspired by Kiss and early Rush and various things. Anything that had, a lot of guys were using V-shaped guitars and Explorers and Destroyers. And I started seeing ads for like Dean guitars and all their wild shapes at the time and things. That just got into my blood. And so I was sketching these guitars. Like I say, then about that time, I was in the high school era and got into the high school woodshop thing. So I'm back to there again. And I decided to build my own guitar in the one semester of high school woodshop that I took. And I did it. I had this machine gun shaped guitar that I had drawn up, and I built a M16 shaped guitar.
Now today that might have been problematic, I would imagine, but
yeah, exactly. No, we're not going to go there. But but that's what I did. I got a lot of attention up there. Coming back in the summers from college breaks, I was playing in a band. I lived at this area of Missouri called the Lake of the Ozarks, which is like a heavily tourist area and all. And so I was playing my guitar in a band, and I was playing on like a little a boat that would go out. It was called a dance cruise boat. It would go out for a couple of hours. We'd take a load of kids out, and my band would play. And in other words, I started getting a lot of attention with this guitar. So I started thinking to myself, this might be a fun thing to do, to build guitars. Well, at that time, I was still serious about. I was going off to college. I was pursuing a geological engineering career. And I got into my second or third year of college, and the whole industry, oil industry, which I was going in, the geological engineering would have been like oil exploration and things like that. That whole industry the bottom fell out, and there were no jobs to be found. It was a real tough time. I thought it was going to be a very lucrative career, and it turned out to be, at that point in time, there was nothing to be found. So I thought, man, this is a perfect opportunity for me to start building guitars. Well, my parents, of course, were providing my schooling and stuff. And so I came back after my third year of school, and approached my parents on, instead of sending me to my fourth year of college and paying my room and board and tuition, would you consider letting me have half of your garage and buying me some little, hand tools and some little starter, like a little starter table saw and little tiny planer and little bench drill and drill press and stuff like that, just to get, the basics and start going. And they agreed to it.
Wow. That's a tough thing for some.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's hard to come by. But my parents have always been, or were always, so supportive of me, and they agreed to do that. And so I think I took over their entire garage. And at first I was doing like refinishing and repair work and stuff like that. But I started getting these wild shaped guitars slowly, building a few of them. Next thing I know, I had sent in some press releases to some magazines like Guitar World and Guitar Player and various trade magazines at the time. And one of them, Guitar World, called me one year and said, we would like you to send in a submission for our buyer's guide. And I had no idea what that was even about. So I ran out to my garage and I popped a few little snapshots with my Instamatic camera and went up and got them developed into 1 hour photo thing and sent them off to Guitar World. Oh, wow. And they put me in the buyer's guide, and that was 1984. And that basically launched the company. So
from that buyer's guide, Bill, did you get any inquiries or sales from that or all? Or what?
I not only got inquiries, I got a lot of attention, and I actually sold an instrument. It was a custom instrument for a young lady in Maine who ordered a guitar. It was a custom-shaped V guitar with some graphics on it and some custom inlays and all. And I actually got my first order and took off.
So just out of curiosity, what did that guitar sell for? Do you remember?
Oh, a lot of my prices back in that day and age were, $7, $8, maybe $1,000. Her completely custom instrument may have been $1,200 or $1,300 at the time.
Now, today, that's probably a different story, I would imagine, eh?
Yeah, quite a bit different.
Well, that's an amazing story, and I had no idea that you had started so young, and that would explain how you got into it at that age, almost hitting the ground running.
Yes.
I think, kind of moving forward now, I think few would disagree that over the years that you've broken a lot of ground and were in many ways, and in my opinion, a pioneer of sorts. And I guess as you look back, are there innovations in design, construction, et cetera, that you can see that impacted the market down the road? In other words, things that you developed, you started to see other people starting to do down the road? Because it seems to me that I have, but I'm wondering how you view it.
Definitely, we've seen a lot of our innovations and unique, building characteristics and techniques developed and adopted by other builders and even larger manufacturers. Right from the very beginning, when I designed my first model line back in the mid '80s, every one of my instruments had a carved neck heel super highly carved, what I call a neck through feel heel. Instead of having a square block or maybe just a slightly little, rounded over block or whatever, we actually took the heel and completely carved it all the way down to where it literally just ran flush into the neck, as if you playing on a neck through body guitar or whatever. Our heel on our bolt-on instruments and everything was always carved, very radically like that. And that's one of the things we were always real proud of on our bolt-on instruments. I've seen that's now becoming quite the thing to do. We always left all of our access areas, like a truss rod adjustment access area and the tremolo spring cavity cover. We never put covers on those areas like was so traditional, and still is a lot with a lot of instruments today. You'll have the plastic covers,
sure,
or people put,
of course,
the various things. We always left those. We would round them over and dress them up and everything, and we would finish them inside, but we would leave them open. And I've noticed that's something that a lot of companies and builders are doing. Another thing was on the backs of our necks, no matter how the instrument was finished, whether it had a color finish on it or a clear finish or whatever, we always made the back of the neck satin. After we put the clear coat on and all, we would sand it to where it had a satin finish on it, so it was super fast and slick.
Wow.
Nobody was doing that. I mean, it was everybody would always polish everything out, highly polished. And I've noticed almost all the manufacturers are doing that nowadays.
That's right.
Another thing we did, we were also one of the first companies. I'm not going to claim that we were the first. As a matter of fact, on any of these, I don't know that we were the absolute first to do them. I'm just saying I had never seen it done, and it was definitely something that we did early on that's now being adopted. But another thing that we did was the actual satin finishes on the guitars themselves. We would do clear satin finishes. We would do metallic finishes that were satin, instead of being polished out. And you're seeing that everywhere. Another thing that we did that was an exclusive to Conklin at the time was what we call our melted tops, where we would take several different species of wood, usually like exotic woods and figured woods, and we would create what we called an organic graphic. And it was a special technique that we used to join the woods together, and they were, some type of a curvy shape or graphic. You've almost certainly seen what I'm talking about.
Of course.
While that has not been adopted by a large number of companies, I definitely am seeing a handful of companies out there, more and more each year, that are starting to do things. Yeah. And there's a couple companies out now. We've done them like on the tops of the bodies. We've done fingerboards, and we've done headstock caps like that. A lot of times we'll carry it throughout the entire instrument. I'm seeing that more and more, where companies will do like a fingerboard with two or three different woods in it, or maybe do some little touch on the headstock cap where they'll do 2 or 3 woods and they'll have little curvy patterns. And that was something that we were definitely on the forefront of that clear back in about 91. I
would imagine there's probably a few more things too. I want to continue on here, and I think most of the people that I have talked to who know Conklin, and there's a lot of them, they tend to associate you in large part with extended range instruments. I know that that's not the only thing that you do, but certainly has been a significant part of your work. And so I'm wondering, from your vantage point, can you give us a sense of where that segment has come from as opposed to where it is today?
Well, there again, where it came from for us, we never intended to get into multi-string instruments or extended range instruments or start, a whole new niche in the market or anything like that. That was never our intention. Like I said, when I started out, I was completely inspired and intrigued and motivated by, it was all about shapes. It was all about the aesthetic, the graphics, the this and that. Then about 1989, 1990, I had this young man approach us about building a 7-string bass for him. It was a interesting experience because this guy was quite the artist, and he would send us these giant 11 by 17 envelopes in the mail, and the whole envelope would have artwork all over it I'm assuming it was pictures of like him or how he interpreted himself. playing this, and he was holding this 7-string bass that he had designed, and his beautiful artwork was all over the envelope. And then I would open it up and pull out this full-size rendering that he had done of his 7-string bass design.
Wow, boy, that's
and it. Yeah, it was very, for me, it was an incredible experience to see, how this gentleman was inspired, and it rubbed off on me. Well, anyway, we had no idea how we were going to tackle this brand new instrument. There were no bridges, there were no pickups or anything available at the time. So we ended up building the bridge. We ended up having, I believe, probably Bartolini, I think at the time, built custom pickups for us. And it was just some of the things that we had to do were extreme challenges in order to create this multi-string instrument. But anyway, we did it. He loved it. And then after we delivered that instrument, we were getting ready to do our first NAMM show in 1990, I believe it was, 90 or 91. And we were going to go out to the Winter NAMM show. It was our first experience at a trade show. And I thought, well, what can we do to, really try to wow some people and make a hit out there, make a splash? And so we decided to I designed my own version of a 7-string bass, double cutaway, what has now become our Sidewinder body style.
Oh, sure, of course.
And we built 2 7-string basses, and we took them out to the show. To say they made a splash was an incredible understatement. We had literally a line of people that were coming through, almost like at a wedding reception or something, coming by to greet our 7-string basses. People would come by and they would just, awe and ooh, and they would photograph it. We had media coming by. We had other manufacturers coming by. It was crazy. And so it was a major hit. And after the show, we knew that we were kind of onto something. So we continued to develop the 7-string bass. We ended up doing an ad and created a really nice, laid out ad and put it in bass player and completely explained the whole idea behind the 7-string bass. And we had some testimonials from some players and all in this, I think it was about a half-page ad we put out. And it just took off. The whole multi-string thing took off. And that's, kind of where we got our start. Just kept developing it. And by, I'd say 95, we were at the Summer NAMM show, and Victor Wooten brought Bill Dickens by the booth and said, Bill is looking for a 7-string bass. And he put us together, and we hit it off immediately and built, Bill Dickens a 7. And then a couple of years later, Bill came back to us and said, you did the 7 for me. I'm loving it. Is there any way that you think you could build a 9-string bass? And of course, again,
the 9.
Again, it was, he was like, I want one lower and one higher string than what's on my 7. Well, again, it's like we said, sure, we'll do this. Had no idea how we were going to achieve that, but just, again, approached, had bridges custom made, pickups custom made, and we just kept breaking ground. And by that time, other manufacturers who were starting to pick up on it, and small builders, of course, and it's just snowballed.
Let me ask you this, because I know that you being kind of a bass guy and probably having a tendency in that direction, I know you've built a lot of guitars, and you got into multi-string guitars and done a variety of things. How did that play? When did you start doing that, and how significant has that been in that extended range area?
Well, honestly, it's been about 50-50.
Wow, that much. Okay. All right.
Yeah. The guitar side of it has been good. I will say that the guitar end of it was much more intentional for us than was the bass side of it. We were
sense.
kind of, so after the bass thing really started taking off, I just, naturally thought, well, if multi-string and extended range basses are so sought after, then maybe we could do something with an 8-string guitar or a 9-string guitar. So in 1992, we built our first 8-string guitar and also took that to the show. And we had a couple local guys that were playing them around here. And again, things just started taking off, and we were doing more ads at the time. And so the 8-string market really did quite well for us. 8-string guitar market. And like I said, it was probably about 50-50 on our work orders for quite a few years.
So
extended range guitar side.
Yeah, let's kind of move through it a little bit and kind of fast forward to later times, because you described a lot of things that happened in the 90s, but we're, how many years, a couple of decades later, you're still doing that to some degree, but obviously there's other people that are doing it. How has that market changed over the years?
It's definitely extremely prevalent in today's market. Just about every company, major company, major manufacturer, or even small builder is now into doing some type of extended range, multi-scale, ERB, multi-string type of instrument right now. A lot of companies are, coming out with instruments, and they're touting it as some groundbreaking, great new innovation that they've developed, without realizing that we've been doing it since early 90s. And, I'm not saying that we were the only company doing it. Obviously, you had Ralph Novak and his multi-scale patent that he had going at the time. He was into it with his, his Charlie Hunter commission and all. So there were a couple of guys getting into it, but we, for these big companies and builders that are coming out now, and claiming that, here's our great brand new product that we've innovated from, just in the last few years.
Yeah, from thin air, right?
From thin air. And here it's been, it's been a burgeoning market, a growing market for at least 2 decades.
Yeah, well, you really kind of carried the ball. I mean, I think any way you look at it, Conklin carried the ball a long way, and, others have picked it up and taken their own stab at it. But look, I think we can all agree that business has changed big time in the last 10 years, or even more so in the last few, Bill. So I'm kind of wondering now at this point if you could assess the big picture view of the business today as you see it in terms of both challenges and the opportunities. Well,
the challenges, that we saw when we were starting out, like I've kind of been over a little bit already, was that there were no custom hardware companies, extended range bridges and pickups and all back in that early to mid, even late 80s and early 90s kind of era that we started doing this in. The great challenge for us was to be able to actually create hardware, create pickups, or have them custom made at great expense and all. Today, there's so many opportunities for all the new builders and even the manufacturers and all. Just about every hardware company now offers a full line of 7, 8, 9-string guitar, 7, 8, 9-string bass, bridges and pickups, and a full, it's a huge part of their line. Again, with the manufacturers building the instruments, I don't think I can think of a hardware manufacturer that doesn't have a full line of extended range and multi-scale. And even in the headless market, they're building, Hipshot has a 7 and an 8, and I think possibly even a 9-string bass headless, system now available. ABM is catering to it big time. All the pickup manufacturers are catering to the extended range. So the opportunities for companies nowadays, especially, small builders that are kind of tight on, doing little one-offs and things and tight on budget and all, it's all out there, And so I guess we've opened up doors in more ways than what we really realized at the time.
I think that's
for
true.
Us, it was a struggle. Today, it's not so much of a struggle to be able to do that kind of, to add that to your business is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, it's opened up a lot of, as you say, opportunities for a lot of builders now to do that sort of thing, because they don't have to invent everything. They don't have to build it themselves like you did. I mean, you really had to create the product in those days. But, as we get kind of down to the end here, now's the time where I really want to know about Bill Conklin and Conklin guitars now and going forward in terms of products and markets and customers. Because last time we talked, you thought that things might change a little bit, and I'm interested for you to fill in some of the blanks for us.
Well, as my company evolves and I, as a person, evolve and mature, obviously, I'm trying to make the company or evolve the company and make it more mature as well.
Sure.
And so in moving forward, we are actually kind of looking back and sort of, in a way, almost starting over with the type of business that I originally wanted to run or meant to run, and kind of got sidetracked for the last 25 or 30 years. So we're actually kind of going back and doing, focusing on 4-string and 5-string basses. We're actually focusing on 6-string guitars, much more traditional designs. We're implementing a lot of the more kind of retro, kind of keeping with what's hot right now. I mean, there's no disputing the fact that, the sort of the retro, the vintage vibe thing is really happening. So we're kind of catering to that. And we're designing a lot of guitars that have pick guards and, more sort of traditional finishes. Is still maintaining the modern side of what we do and our building techniques and characteristics and all, but incorporating sort of that retro vibe and everything. And we're having a lot of fun with that. Another thing we're doing is designing a new mobile-friendly website and kind of bringing our website up to date. And we've been for the last quite a few years actually trying to develop a more of a standard line with standard models that we can deliver much more, quickly, things that we can kind of build up a little bit of an inventory and have things available. So our turnaround times and the affordability of the product itself is much more approachable or attainable for, the average musician without having to go completely custom. And it's been something that Mike and I have been trying to do for years now, but we've been so busy, which is, I'm not complaining about it.
Yeah, it's a good problem.
Yeah, exactly. But as a two-man team, and that's another, talking about a challenge is being a two-man shop. It's, we can't do a lot of things. We can only focus on so much each day. And the custom side of it has been, completely taking all of our time, which is we've been blessed. I can't complain. But lately we have been really, really trying to focus on developing this little bit more traditional standard model line. Mm-hmm. And with our new website that we hope to have out by probably, mid-year, I think you'll see some of those kind of things being, brought online and implemented.
That's a really good time to do that, and you kind of want to coordinate all that stuff. And that kind of brings me to the place where I say we need to talk again down the road after all this stuff has transpired and there's been some changes, and kind of see where we've come from in that point, because as we say, change is always happening. There's no way to get around it. And, we can look forward to that without any doubt.
Absolutely.
And I do listen, I really appreciate you coming on the show. Very informative stuff. And I'm sure that our listeners will really find it valuable and useful. And again, I appreciate knowing you all these years, and thank you again for coming on.
Jeff, it's always been a pleasure. You have done so much for us over the years.
Well, I appreciate that, Bill, and we'll look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thank you so much, Jeff.
Okay. This is The Value Shot. And remember that you can listen to all of these segments as standalone videos with captions on our website in the videos section, or on our YouTube channel. Just search for Guitar Business Radio. Now, I want to cover a few areas today, and remember, all of this is related in one way or another. So if you want to have all the context and you haven't already done so, go back and listen from episode 1. That's another reason why we made these short segments available by themselves. Now, most of what I've been talking about in the Value Shot so far may seem very general to some of you, and that's one way of looking at it. But as I've said many times, I think of it as foundational. It's the stuff you build your business or your personal life, in some cases, on top of. These are reference points that you call up on a regular basis to help with decision-making, problem-solving, and generally having better results with more positive outcomes. What I'm not doing is giving you information on how to build your product better or perform your particular service more efficiently. You already know how to do that, or something within or available to you does, and you just have to unlock it and reveal it. More importantly, what I can do for you here is give you basic tools and ideas that you can use to facilitate that process. You know the old story about offering someone a fish and you feed them for a day, teach them to fish, and you feed them for a lifetime? Well, that's kind of the model here. Now, in our business at Guitar PR, we do go a lot deeper into specific situations and apply those same principles for our clients and their particular objectives. But you can use these methods yourself. And if you've been following along, you've heard me talk a lot about the 3 C's. That's our simple checkbox formula for dealing with any marketing or sales-related activity. And again, just to review, the 3 C's are capture the attention, convey the message, and compel the action. So I want to go a bit further on a couple of points today on how we actually implement the formula. Now, I've always given this to you in the order in which the process typically executes, starting with capture the attention or top down. And I'm talking about when the activity is presented to the market in finished form, whatever that is. But most of the time when we're doing the planning or creative work on this stuff, we're working in reverse order or bottom up. We start with what action do we want to compel? But now let me add another piece into the equation, and that is we can equate action in some cases with a different term, and that is result or results. There can be a distinction between action and results where the action contributes to or facilitates results. When we're working in the development stage, we may be asking what result or what results do we want to achieve, and then with that understanding, what action or actions will be required to make that happen. So, continuing to work in reverse, we then ask what message or messages are likely to compel the action needed to achieve the result. And finally, all the way back up to the top, how can we best capture the attention that will allow us to properly convey the message? Remember, this is a formula or a framework of sorts to work from, and it's universal in nature, so it works across the board. And because it's very simple, it's easy to implement. But that does not mean, however, that it automatically generates the answers to the questions you'll come up against in the process. That may take some work and some trial and error, which remember is R&D. Nonetheless, it will make your overall job easier and improve your odds of success. Now on to something else. How many times has somebody offered you some constructive criticism? It's usually a cringeworthy offer at best. And when it was delivered, did you wonder what happened to the constructive part? Did you think the word constructive should imply a positive aspect, only to find out that it was a phony and deceptive offer? And by the way, did this come from a friend, a family member, or a coworker of some kind who pretended only to have your best interest in mind? Well, yes is the common answer. And my view of constructive criticism is that it's an oxymoron. There's really nothing constructive about criticism. And I know I'm going to get some pushback on this, but here's how I look at it. Criticism as such is basically a negative thing. Negativity always breeds more negativity in one form or another. Even if you think you're helping someone by offering the big CC, you can't expect to project negativity and get positive results in return. Of course, let's face it. So-called constructive criticism is not always offered for seemingly, and by the way, erroneous positive results. It's often done from an internal negative emotion about someone else, and the criticism is just a vehicle to express that. Adding the word constructive is often an attempt to hide the real feeling, unfortunately. Now, I've come up with a criticism classification system, and yep, you guessed it, there are 3 categories of criticism. They are opportunistic, competitive, and vindictive. Now, these are my arbitrary categories. I don't know if anyone else has used these particular ones, but I do imagine there are others. And I see the first 2 as similar, where opportunistic is typically seen in personal relationships and competitive is primarily in business situations. The similarity revolves around the idea that there is something to be gained with the criticism, like an advantage or superiority, control, etc. The third category, vindictive criticism, is the worst kind. Not that any of them is particularly good, but you've all seen examples of this, right? And generally, this has nothing to do with the person at the other end of the criticism. The critic is typically experiencing a life disorder of some magnitude, and somehow criticizing others makes them feel better for just a few fleeting moments, I'm afraid. So what's the alternative? Simple. A more positive approach. In lieu of harsh, direct criticism, suggest alternatives for a better outcome. Point out the typical negative results that may come about with particular activities or behaviors, if need be. But that ought to be it. And by the way, there's no political bent here. I'm not encouraging participation trophies or anything like that. It's just a better way to handle it. And when you're offered constructive criticism, well, here's what I routinely do. If someone asks me, can I give you some constructive criticism? I respond immediately with no, but I'm occasionally interested in hearing other opinions. Now that will usually stop them in their tracks or cause them to rethink their strategy. Now in the next Value Shot in episode 8, I'll talk more about competitive criticism and how to deal with that. And finally, when was the last time you said or heard someone say to another or you, I disagree, or I completely disagree? And they said that with a tone that most certainly implies, you're wrong and I'm right. You're an idiot and I'm smart. Sound familiar? Well, some years ago, this idea was pointed out to me by someone I greatly respect because I was doing just that. I had never realized what a terribly negative and thoughtless thing that was to say. He suggested that a much better approach was to simply say something along the lines of, essentially, I have a different opinion or view, or I think I understand what you're saying, but I see things differently. Can you see how that slight adjustment in your language could change the course of the conversation? Unless, of course, your underlying motivation is actually to be critical. Well, I can tell you in all honesty, since that day, I have not uttered the words, I disagree, to anyone. So I guess I'm just being the change I want to see, and maybe a few of you might think twice the next time you feel the urge to say those words yourself. Thanks for listening, and as always, stay positive, stay focused on the destination, and keep all your options open on how you're going to get there. And I'll see you on episode 8. And that's it for this episode of Guitar Business Radio. Thanks for being with us. You can stay tuned and stay in touch at guitarbusinessradio.com.